welcome again to Learning Music with Pat. Over the years, I've dealt with many students, and they all have the same comment when they're first starting an instrument. There's a lot to remember at once. You have to remember how to hold it, how to blow it, how to read a note, how to play that note, how to finger the instrument, and it just seems overwhelming, the amount of things that you have to know in order to play the instrument. But you can rest assured that you will learn, and as you learn, everything becomes so commonplace to you and everything becomes so familiar, you don't even think about it. If I pick up an instrument, say I'm picking up an alto saxophone, which is my main instrument, I don't have to look at the music and say, this is a B, and this is how you finger it, and this is how you put the mouthpiece in your mouth, and this is how you position your mouth, and this is how you blow, and this is how you play. If you had to think of everything that you have to do, you would be totally confused and you would play very little music. But as you get so that you are learning, all of these things come natural to you. So in the beginning, there seems to be an awful lot to know. And then suddenly you learn it. I can remember when I was in the first and second grade learning reading. And I don't know, this will date me, I'm sure. But if you remember those books, Dick and Jane reading books. You probably are too young for that. But the books, you open them up and they say, see Jane run. You know, see Dick run. See Dick and Jane run. See Spot, he was the dog. And it's that repetition all over the books. It was see this, see that. It was all repetitive. And when it's repetitive like that, you can't help but learn it. And when you learn it, it seems easy after that. And I can remember reading when I was in the third grade and wondering why the first grade and second grade books were so easy and the third grade books were so hard. And I remember asking my mother about it, and she said, well, you're learning new things. You already know the old things, so the things you've already learned seem easy. It's the new things that seem hard. And so that's the way it is with music. With music, you start out very simply, and it seems difficult to you because you don't know it. When you become familiar with it, it's now easy, and so you don't even think about it. You just pick up the instrument and do it. So I thought today that I would go into the typical mistakes that beginners make. I can't hear you as you're playing, but after years of teaching, I know pretty much what you're going to run into when you start to play, and a lot of times it's just simple correction and fine-tuning that you need. So let's start off with dealing with a recorder. What kind of mistakes can you make on a recorder? I'll show you. There's one of them right there. That was fun. You want me to do it again? I don't think so. If you overblow, if your embouchure is not right, and you overblow an instrument, you will get a squeal on it. Now that squeal is actually a tone. It's called an overtone. It sounds just like a squeal. It was not supposed to be there, but it is an actual tone. The instrument can actually play that. If you wanted that tone and you fingered it like you should, then that would be a perfect tone. But that's what you do. When you don't have your fingers covering the holes exactly. Now remember, piano is a lot different than the woodwind instruments. With a piano, one note, one finger. But when you're on a woodwind instrument, it may be one note, several fingers to play it. So you have to be absolutely sure that your fingers are right on those holes and cover them completely, because if you don't, you're going to get a half tone, a sharp or a flat, even if you don't want one, no tone at all, or a squeal. If you blow too hard and you overblow an instrument, it will squeal. That's a normal note. That's the squeal. I blowed too hard. That was the reason for that squeal. You must remember to keep the fingers down exactly. And when you put the mouthpiece in your mouth, it has to go in about a third of the way. The bottom lip covering the bottom teeth, the top teeth covering the top of the instrument. Blow moderately hard, not too hard though. That's one of the things that you might have trouble with, is getting the fingers on the holes exactly right. After a while, you'll be able to feel it. I can pick up an instrument and I can feel where the holes are, and I don't even have to look at it. And I can feel where the tone hole is in the back, the thumb hole. Your thumb must be covering that hole, because if it isn't, you're not going to get the note that you want. My fingering for the front was the same. I just took my finger off, and as a result of that, I got a completely different tone. Another mistake that students make is they make big divisions between their tones and make a separation between them when a separation is not necessary. I'll demonstrate this. The notes are there, but there should not be spaces between them unless the music states that there is. If the music has a rest or some kind of a delineation that you take a break, then of course you would shorten the tone. But if it does not, then the tone has to be held right up to the time that the next tone is tongued. So you go, or if you want it longer, I held it longer, but the note goes up to the next note, you tongue the next note, and there's no break between them except for the time that you're spending tonguing. Now, if you need to breathe because you're running out of breath, the normal thing that you should do, if you can't wait for a rest or something in the music that tells you that you're going to take a break, you shorten a note slightly to breathe. You make the note just a little bit shorter, and then you take your breath. It doesn't have to be obvious. You're not going. You don't want to hear the breath. You just want to take a breath, and you just shorten the note quickly in order to do that. So overblowing, not getting your fingers on the notes right, not holding the notes the proper length, those are all beginner's mistakes that are easy enough to fix. If you pull your finger down, that's the way you get an octave on a recorder. But that's what I want. But you notice that I have my thumb still on the thumb hole. And if I were to take it off, then I get a completely different note. For an octave, I just slip the thumb down a little bit and leave it half open, half closed. It's called half holing. And you do the same also if you want to get sharps and flats. Another mistake that people make is that they don't tongue when they're supposed to. If they're supposed to tongue and they don't, you get. There's no delineation between the notes. It kind of just runs into each other. Each note has to be distinct. It has to really be there. And so you do that by tonguing. If you don't tongue, you don't get that delineation. Not. And remember, in tonguing, it's you put your tongue to the roof of your mouth as if you were saying ta. If you're saying ta, then the T part of it, the tongue goes and hits the roof of the mouth, and then it withdraws. So you can say the ah part, ta, ta. And that's what tonguing is. Okay, the space between the notes. Also, you should not have long fingernails. The finger is there's a little, like, you might say it's almost like a pad for every finger. That goes down on top of the instrument. You do not have, if you have long fingernails, that can interrupt. It interrupts more, I think, with the violins and the pianos and so forth. But woodwind instruments you can get, like saxophones and clarinets, you can really get your fingernails caught up. And that's not good either. So you have to remember to do that. Once you learn how to do it, it's really easy to do it. So that's some of the things. Flat fingers, never. The problem with flat fingers is that if you really want to do a lot, you can't get your fingers in position in time. If you're doing runs and scales and music that's fast, I was playing one this morning. I don't know if you recognize that piece, but it's a simple wishes or simple songs. It's a Quaker hymn. But at any rate, if you're playing anything that's really fast, you have to make sure that those fingers are in position, because if they're not, you're not going to be able to get them down in time to be able to play. I'm trying to think of some other things that you might do that might be problematic. If you want to, you can always email me, because I can answer your questions on the air, pat@cheshiretv.org, and I can answer your questions on air if you're having a problem. Remember to take full, deep breaths. You're not breathing shallow. You have to breathe from your diaphragm. That's important for both woodwinds and brass. And remember, as you do this, remember your position for holding the instrument, for blowing in, for the embouchure and what it's supposed to be like. Last time I went over kinds of instruments that you can buy so you don't, in a sense, sabotage or weaken the embouchure that you have for the instrument that you're now playing. That embouchure is critical, because without it, you're not going to be able to hold notes, you're not going to be able to complete tones, and that's probably about it. But I would like to hear from anyone who's having a problem so I can address it on the air and show you what you may be doing wrong. Recorders are not very difficult to play. They can play some incredibly complex music. I arrange classical pieces on the recorders all the time and play really complicated music. They are capable of playing a lot of music. They have a full octave range. So they're much better than some of the other smaller instruments for you to play. So this is probably, if you're making mistakes, it's probably within the range of what I have told you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to the whiteboard, and I'm going to show you some things about notes. And this will be our beginning first time to do this. The different kinds of notes, what they are, how they appear on the staff, and how you can play them. Let me just do this. We'll do it simply to begin with. This is a whole note. It's just like a plain circle. If I'm going to put it on the staff, I could put it like that. I could put it like that. These are two different notes, but they are whole notes. A whole note is just an open circle and usually has 4 beats. So if you were to see this note, this is an A and this is a D. I'll be teaching you that as time goes on, but the whole note has 4 beats to each note. Usually. Now, there's always the exception to the rule. But let's say that we're just following what the basic rules are, because this is a beginning kind of music class. Whole note, circle. Then you can get your half note, which is a circle but has a line, or you could draw it this way. It takes two half notes to make a whole. A half note is usually held for 2 beats. 2 beats. So you have, and then again, there's no coloring in. It's a plain, simple note. I can make these whole notes half notes just by this. Now the line that goes up or down is called a stem, and sometimes they go down, sometimes they go up. It doesn't make any difference in terms of the value of the note. The stems that go up are usually on the lower lines and spaces. It's just easier to read. The stem that goes down is on the higher. It just makes it easier to read. It doesn't change the value of the note at all. But it takes 2 halves to make a whole. And then the next note you would have would be the quarter notes. These are filled in. I'm not going to make it look too artistic. And they have a stem down or up. I could make this a quarter note just by coloring it in. I can make this a quarter note just by coloring it in. It is a darkened note. I'm using it in red. Usually your music is always printed in black in no other color, but I'm using red as a contrasting color because you can see it better. It takes 4 quarter notes to equal a whole. It takes 2 quarter notes to equal a half. Think of it as if you're eating a piece of pie. Here's your pie. Not exactly circular, but I tried. Here's your half. Here's your quarters. Quarter or half. And totally equaling a whole. Now this is the most simplistic way of looking at it, but then your quarter note can be subdivided. If I'm to take a quarter note, here's a quarter note, I'll do it down. If I want to make it even shorter, I can subdivide it and make an 1/8 note out of it. These are 1/8 notes. You have a stem down. Now these little markings on the side are flags. So you have the note, you have the stem, you have the flag. Now, it's going to take 4 of these to make a quarter. And it's going to take 8 of them to make a half. 1 and 2 and, if I want to do some more. You can actually, instead of marking them each with a little stem and flag, you can draw a line and draw these lines. Those are all 1/8 notes. They like have the stem. It's the equivalent of having a stem and a flag for each one. Now, a quarter note, let me watch my time. For a quarter note, it can be further divided. Okay, here's your 1/8 note. You can further split that up and make a 1/16. Down or up, makes no difference. Here's a 1/16 note. Or, if I wanted to use this, I could add a second line across. That second line across makes those 1/16 notes. And 4/16 to an 1/8. No, actually 4/16 to a quarter. You just keep subdividing. Here's your 1/8. You can make a 32nd note. You can make a 64th note. We won't be actually playing those. They're very, very fast notes. So what you're doing is a case of simple fractions here. The whole divided into the half. The half divided into the quarter divided into 1/8, the 1/8 divided into 1/16. That's probably about as far as a beginning class would get, but you can take your 1/16 and divide it into 32nds. You can take your 32nds and divide them into 64ths, and so on it goes, and you can get some tremendously complex music. Now here you have a staff. Any 5 lines is a staff. And we have, what the woodwinds will do is they'll play off the treble clef, which is going to look like this. These are clefs. That's a treble clef. The notes are the instruments that I would be teaching here: flute, clarinet, saxophone, the upper instruments in terms of tone, all play off the treble clef. You do have a bass clef, which we would not be getting into, but this is the bass clef. Now a piano plays with both the left and the right hands, so you would have a line. I already have one here, but I would have a line that just goes down and includes both this and this staff line. We'll skip this for now. That means when you have a line that covers both of them, both the left and the right hand, or both the bass and the treble clef, are played together. This is what you get for piano music. For piano music, the left hand plays the bass, the right hand plays the treble, and you get both of that. If you go in and buy sheet music, or if you look at hymns and so forth, hymn books, they will always have a double bar line, sometimes more, sometimes they have 3 or more, but the basic would be 2 bar lines, and they play together, left and right hand on a piano. This is a measure of what's called a bar line. You subdivide the staff into these lines. This is a measure. Each one of these is a measure. And sometimes these measures are numbered. You might say this is 3. You don't necessarily mark each one. This would be, if it continued, like this would be 4. If you were playing in an orchestra and the conductor wanted you to go back to a certain point, he would tell you what the measure was. Go to bar 4. They're also called rehearsal markings. If you're in a band and things kind of fall apart and everybody's lost their place, a conductor might say, go to rehearsal marking 6, and they all go to that measure because it's been marked, and they all know where they are, and they just continue on with the piece. So on a piano, left hand, right hand. Now everything that I say, there's always an exception to the rule. On some piano music, the left hand will go up above the right hand, but that's not usual. That's in special circumstances. Sometimes this note is worth more than 4 beats. Sometimes it's worth less than 4 beats. But I'm talking about the general rule of things. I'm not talking about specific instances where there would be a change because of the way that the music was marked. If you have a flat or a sharp, that's your key signature. It tells you sharps and flats. And if you have, I'm going to put a 4/4, that's your time signature. It shows you what the beats are in the measure. So you want 4 of the quarter notes. 4 is a quarter note. These are the quarter notes. You want the equivalent of 4 of them in each measure. This tells you how many. This tells you the type of note. So I don't want to get too confusing. I'm going to close it here. We're about out of time. And next time I'm going to go into more ways of telling what the notes are, how to read them, and how to be able to remember them. It's not as hard as you think, and I think you'll actually enjoy it once we get into it. So thank you for watching, and please join me next time.